Nothing happens twice in business. There will be no one exactly like Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft. There will be no one exactly like Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. You have no such luck if you aim to be exactly like them. Being brilliant entrepreneurs like Gates and Zuckerberg is impossible to replicate. So why not be exactly like you? Aim to create your own path where you can become an extraordinary entrepreneur. Startups can be founded and managed by anyone, but not every startup can become a success. This book will teach you what to remember, what to do and avoid, and what to expect when building your startup. Most importantly, this book will teach you how to become an expert in the industry. The challenge of the future. What important truth do some people agree with you on? Take a minute or two to think about your answer. Do you have one? Sorry to break it to you, but your essential truth is probably already a generally agreed upon statement. For instance, a person might say that the education system is broken and needs many changes. This is a view commonly shared by a lot of people. The author Peter Thiel asked this question because he wanted people to grasp his concept of the future. When starting a business, the future is a significant factor you must consider. Every decision you make affects how well your business will do in a few years. For Peter, the future is all the moments yet to happen. However, the future needs to be different from the present. These are all standard concepts of the future, right? This is what Peter means by saying your important truth is an already agreed upon statement. But Peter adds that the changes need to be drastic. The future is when people's lives are very different from how we live today. This is an answer that will cause some debate. It is not necessarily a popular answer. Thus, it is a necessary truth that people rarely agree on. The future has two types. There is horizontal and vertical progress. Horizontal or extensive progress is copying things that work. It is called horizontal progress because if it were a line, progress would extend to the side like a horizon. In a graph, it is just going from one to n. A good example of this kind of progress would be globalization. It is replicating the things that work in a particular country and using this worldwide. For instance, China copied a lot of things from the United States. China copied the railroads, air conditioning, and many more. This applies to other countries as well. Meanwhile, vertical or intensive progress is doing new things. This is when you do things no one has ever done before. In a graph, the line goes up. It is going from 0 to 1. People can do this through the help of technology. Here is another example to further distinguish horizontal and vertical progress. Horizontal progress is when you make one typewriter and make 100 more. Vertical progress is when you use a typewriter and in the future, a computer. Party like it's 1999. The 90s was a decade defined by the most remarkable breakthroughs and terrible business decisions. Globalization was at an all-time high, but so were the recession and unemployment rates. Perhaps the most popular year of the 90s was 1999. Technology was at a snail's pace before 1999. No one was interested in the internet. Computer-related majors such as computer science and information technology were not popular. Anything digital was a foreign concept to the world. But everything changed when the internet was introduced. Talks about online investments and browsers were suddenly everywhere. Stocks and tech companies started appearing out of nowhere. Then Yahoo, Amazon, and other websites were introduced. The market was bursting with investments and revenues. Everyone was crazy about the internet. This was called the dot-com boom. People were frantic to have online startups because that was where plenty of money came from. But the field of economics says that what comes up always comes down. The dot-com boom was short-lived. It became a dot-com crash. By March 2000, the market slowly crashed. Startups were not earning as much. Investments were not as many as before. So, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs developed 4 big lessons that apply to business today. First, make slow advances. Taking small steps is the only safe way to maneuver the business world. Be careful of people who will promise you grand things immediately. Second, stay lean and flexible. In other words, have unplanned strategies. Do not hesitate to try things out. A part of entrepreneurship is the willingness to explore. Third, improve on the competition. It is a bold move to want to be the one to create a new market. But it takes time and a lot of research. The best way to do this would be to start with a market that already has a lot of customers. Fourth, focus on the product, not sales. Your product is not good enough if you need to advertise it. Use technology to improve your product, not just sell it. The lessons mentioned above are good advice. But for author Peter Thiel, the opposite of those lessons is more accurate. Risking your business to make a bold move is better than following the trend. A bad plan is better than having no plan. Too many competitors can destroy profits. Lastly, sales matter just as much as your product does. It can be confusing which advice to take. This is the time for you to think carefully. You need to ask yourself, what principles in business were shaped by mistaken reactions to past mistakes? From there, you can work on what you think is good advice. You need to think about which ones are effective for you. Last mover advantage. Have you heard of monopoly? Aside from the board game, a monopoly is when you are a single product or service seller. This means that you have no competition in your market, which will give you a steady income. But not all monopolies are great. It is only great if it will endure in the future. How will you determine if a monopoly will endure in the future? You can measure its cash flow or how much money it can make. In business, the value of a business today is the sum of the money it will make in the future. Let us use the example of two companies, the New York Times and Twitter. In 2013, Twitter was valued at $24 billion. However, Twitter kept losing money despite its huge value. Meanwhile, the New York Times earned $133 million in the same year. Which company do you think had more cash flow? The answer is Twitter. It is because investors saw the potential of Twitter. They had confidence that Twitter's cash flow would grow as time passed. On the other hand, the New York Times was slowly losing its cash flow. It is because websites and technology were becoming more profitable than newspapers. Technology companies typically have a different path regarding their financial journey. Twitter and others often lose money for the first few years. It takes a while to build a valuable company. Thus, its profits will take time to come in. But give a tech company 10 or 15 years, and its cash flow and value will increase. What factors should you consider when building your startup? There are 4 factors: proprietary technology, network effects, economies of scale, and branding. Proprietary technology is when your product or service is impossible to be replicated by your competitors. An example of this would be Google's search algorithm. Its results are better than any other search algorithm. But how do you acquire proprietary technology? It should be 10 times better than any competitor's product or service. How do you make something that is 10 times better? It's by building something entirely new. Suppose you produce something truly valuable. Its monetary value will be infinite. A good example of this would be a cure for baldness. Network effects are the second factor. This can only be effective if a lot of people use the product. For instance, Facebook. It would not be that popular if millions of people were not using it. Network effects rely on a large number of people's usage. Xanadu was a company founded in 1960. It promoted a two-way communication network between computers. Its function is that of the World Wide Web today. After several years of trying to make people use it, Xanadu shut down. It was never going to have a network effect. Xanadu required every computer to join the network simultaneously, which was impossible. But the product had a general target market: anyone with a computer. This might be a factor as to why their product did not sell. Xanadu is not aiming for a specific market. Meanwhile, Facebook started with a niche. Mark Zuckerberg initially wanted his Harvard classmates to sign up. Then it slowly expanded to generally everyone. It means that a potential market can be those you might not even consider having business opportunities at all. The third factor is economies of scale. It refers to the costs you can save despite rising production costs. This happens when your product or service is doing well. An example of this would be a software startup that has many clients. Its economy of scale is large since its production costs are zero. Why do software startups cost zero? It is because its expenses, such as office space and staffing, were relatively the same when it began its operations. The expenses do not affect the profit because it keeps coming in. The clients keep returning for the software company's services and pay well. The fourth and last factor for a startup to succeed is branding. It is how you present your company to the customers. Apple is a perfect example of the branding factor. From their iPhones to their MacBooks, Apple has a distinct design that anyone can recognize. Of course, many companies have tried replicating Apple's success. Some companies would mimic Apple's simple ads, expensive pricing, and product launching. But nobody comes close to Apple. Aside from branding, Apple also has the other three factors mentioned above. It has a range of proprietary technologies for hardware and software. Some examples are its touchscreen materials and user interface. Apple is so in demand that it can produce on a large scale. Their costs are tiny compared to the profit they generate. As for the network effects, Apple has a strong one. Thousands of developers build and maintain apps for the platform. In turn, millions of people use these apps and keep them for the long term. This is why Apple is and will continue to be a dominant company in the tech field. If you build it, will they come? In the United States, the advertising industry has about $150 billion in revenue. This industry employs more than 600,000 people. Technology developers are confused by the numbers. They are also doubtful of advertisers, marketers, and salespeople. Tech developers do not think advertisers, marketers, and salespeople are that useful. But they matter. And if you are planning to have a startup, you will surely need the help of someone from the advertising industry. You might have a stereotype of salespeople. They pressure you into buying something that you do not need. They also give the most common sales pitches. But advertising is not just getting someone to buy a product. When done right, advertising creates long-lasting impressions that will drive people to buy the product years from now. Tech developers often underestimate salespeople. In software, everything is straightforward. If your code does not work, you immediately change it. If something works, it is a success. If it does not, it is a failure. The world of sales is not as easy as that. A lot of strategies and techniques go into every sale. You might think your product will speak for itself. You might think advertising it is not necessary. But you still need a strong distribution plan for your product to grow. A strong distribution plan is basically how you measure the money that comes in from selling your product. A distribution plan has two components. One is customer lifetime value, or CLV, and the other is customer acquisition cost, or CAC. Customer lifetime value is the total profit you get over the duration a person is your customer. Your CLV must always be higher than the cost of getting a new customer, which is your customer acquisition cost, CAC. The reason for this distribution plan is it guides you. The more expensive your product, the more you have to spend to make a sale. So you must ensure that your customers will return to you. How do you ensure that they keep coming back to you? It's by identifying your target. Suppose you develop software. It helps the person keep track of their money. Your software also includes tracking expenses, setting short and long-term financial goals, and making forecasts. Surely, there will be several people interested in your software. You might get 10 to 20 clients at most. However, the money you get from them will not be enough to cover the expenses you made to create the software. You spend hours sitting in front of your computer. You consumed gigabytes of internet, electricity, and programs to help you build your software. To earn a lot more, you should aim for complex sales. Complex sales are long-term deals. These are usually with big companies or businesses. Take the example of SpaceX. SpaceX is a rocket startup founded by Elon Musk. Musk convinced NASA to sign contracts with SpaceX worth billions of dollars. What did these contracts mean? SpaceX would replace NASA's shuttles that were no longer in use. With a few contracts, Musk earned billions of dollars. It is no wonder he is one of the wealthiest people on Earth. Complex sales take months, even years, to complete. But when you land a deal, you will have a huge profit. Aside from building a solid network of connections, you must sell the product yourself. This is what Musk did with NASA. He did not ask salespeople to sell SpaceX. Instead, he became the salesman of SpaceX. This is what author Peter Thiel did with his company. He and his co-founder Alex Karp built Palantir, a company specializing in data analytics. Alex, the CEO, spends 25 days a month traveling. He meets with potential clients every single day. Is it exhausting? Yes. Does he always manage to land a deal? No. But 1 or 2 deals a month is more than enough, since these would typically be worth millions of dollars. Just like Elon Musk, Alex Karp and Peter Thiel personally meet with different prospects. These people would want to speak directly with the CEO of the product or service they will buy. As mentioned, it takes a long time to close complex sales. But once you start having deals, other businesses will show interest in your product or service. This is a matter of principle and reliability. When you rely on a person's judgment of buying something, you will be more likely to purchase it. For example, NASA is a space agency in the United States of America. Other companies will also invest in SpaceX because a big and respected organization like NASA did. Another kind of sale is personal sales. Personal sales range from $1,000 to $100,000. Usually, a salesperson is selling a product or service. You might wonder, why would I settle for personal sales when complex sales are where big money is? It is because making enough money can eventually lead to lots of money. Take the example of Box. Box is a company that offers people and businesses a way to store their data safely and conveniently online. This might be the most common thing you can think of in this technology-centered age. But back in 2008, Box's services were groundbreaking. Box started small. They started with small groups of people to test their service. These people were chosen because they expressed problems with their file privacies online. Box noted what the people needed, and they continuously improved their software. In 2009, Box got its first business client, the Stanford Sleep Clinic. The clinic needed software in which they could store records of their experiments. From there, Box grew. Now, each Stanford student and Stanford faculty member enjoy a Box account. Even Stanford Hospital uses the product. It is a widely used software in a huge and prestigious Ivy League school. Box began small. This is how startups usually start. If Box had immediately aimed for Stanford University, they would have failed. Instead, they started small. The company used a small group of people as their sample. Over time, they expanded. Box is an excellent example of personal sales. Conclusion. First, you learned that there are two types when it comes to the future. The future can have horizontal or extensive progress, or it can have vertical or intensive progress. Horizontal progress is when you copy a product or service that is already existing. This kind of progress is how globalization came to be. Meanwhile, vertical progress is creating something completely new. A perfect example of vertical progress would be technology. For your startup to succeed, it needs to have vertical progress. Second, you learned the fundamental principles of what drove business in the 90s. The 90s was when the internet became accessible to the whole world. The internet changed the field of technology and the business world. Entrepreneurs and investors in the 90s learned that they should always make slow advances, stay lean and flexible, be better than the competitors, and focus on their products, not sales. But the opposite of the above can also be true. You should also take bold risks and make a plan, even if it's imperfect. Think about your competitors because having too many will lessen your profit. Also, remember that your sales are as important as your product. Third, you learn the 4 factors to consider when building your startup. These are proprietary technology, network effects, economies of scale, and branding. Proprietary technology is when your product is impossible to be copied by your competitors. Even if a competitor tries to imitate it, your proprietary technology will be far superior to any competitor. Network effects are when people willingly use your product because others are using it. This is similar to having free advertisements since you do not need to convince more people to buy. Economies of scale are simply the money you gain from your product. Despite your expenses rising, you still bring in a lot of money. This happens when you have a big market already. Branding is your product or service's reputation. Your branding must have a lasting impression on your consumers. Lastly, you learned about the importance of sales regarding your product. It is not enough that you have a startup that has vertical progress. You need to work on the marketability of your product too. You can measure your profit through complex or personal sales. Complex sales are when you earn $1 million or more per deal. This is when you have already established your product as reliable and worth the money. The owner usually makes complex sales of the company. Meanwhile, personal sales have a profit range from $1,000 to $100,000. While it is not big as complex sales, personal sales help you get your startup to have a reputable image. Several personal sales can eventually lead to complex sales. There has been an increase in startups in recent years. Anyone can launch a startup. But only a few can truly succeed. You need to work hard and then work hard some more. The problems and obstacles will seem to end. But breakthroughs are usually found after the most brutal battles. So rest if you must. But never quit. The world needs your brilliance.